Well, John, thanks for taking the time out and joining me here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Always happy to be at the MedTech conference, and so glad that we're back in person again this year.
It's been a suppressed. I heard attendance is record-breaking again.
Yeah, attendance very high. A lot of the sessions standing room only. Certainly, we presented our Pulse of the Industry yesterday. Released it on Monday. Quite a bit of press coverage as well. Interest in the sector. And well-attended sessions really all week long.
Yeah. So what were the highlights of the Pulse release that you could share?
Yeah, so a number of things that we kind of drew on. First of all, the industry as a whole was over 500 billion in revenue for the first time ever. So $500 billion in revenue, and record growth in 21 of roughly 15-16%. We've seen that moderate back to a more normalized level of 6% in 2022. Some of that was the COVID effect. Obviously, a tailwind in 21 as the backlog in procedures kind of came to fruition, and also a lot of the diagnostic testing that generated potentially inflated revenues during that period. But overall, very robust from a revenue perspective. MedTech, along with other industries, from a public company valuation perspective, they've trended down now in 2022. And there's several kind of headwinds that are out there as well, whether it's supply chain or inflation or foreign exchange. So those are some things that we're paying attention to as they're rippling through the pipeline. That's really taken the access to public equity kind of off the table. And so we're not seeing IPOs, we're not seeing SPACs. Secondary filings have really gone to the wayside. But one silver lining is that in the MedTech space, we have seen venture capital, so private capital into emerging companies, still continue to flow. And so I think that's been a real positive and speaks to the robustness of the ecosystem, and that hey, we're going to get through this and everything's going to be okay, and it's worth putting this fresh money after these types of companies. It was interesting because we just hosted a mergers and acquisitions panel, and the people that were on the panel have done collectively 10 deals already this year. But what we're seeing in the publicly disclosed markets is that M&A really peaked in the third quarter of 21 and has kind of precipitously dropped off every single quarter since then. So, I think companies have gotten a little bit more reserved, but they're still buying, which is a positive for the sector. And I think it speaks to the ecosystem. We heard it in our CEO panel yesterday that the lifeblood of funding these large organizations is true innovation that comes from outside their four walls. And the other thing that we heard yesterday in our CEO panel was this concept of really building tech-enabled enterprise solutions. And so think about going into the cath lab and owning everything from the imaging to the stents to the diagnostics to the systems that actually run the EMRs. And so I would expect, we heard in our M&A panel, companies are building out capabilities there. That speaks to a real advancement on digital deals, healthcare IT, and that's been one of the sectors that has gotten harder hit during this downturn in the overall economy. So valuations are more depressed there. There's not as much venture capital going into that space, and so I do think we'll see some more opportunistic buys in that space as well. So a little flavor of what we saw in the report.
So a couple things. I want to touch on the venture money coming in. Is the A round in a better or worse position than a C round? Are people holding back dry powder to keep the babies they have in play? So that's one question. And then the comprehensive ownership of a cath lab or an ortho facility, is that being driven by changing centers of care and ASCs coming online and being able to go in and outfit those?
So we are seeing that first money in a little tougher putt. Obviously, VCs want to keep their babies fed, and to your point, we're seeing that money kind of go there first. We're seeing, a lot more execution focus in those privately held companies. But the other thing I would say, and this is, we've unplugged this in our M&A panel, is that they're much more acquisitive on the staged acquisitions. So coming in early, maybe giving some venture capital, doing a stage deal based on milestones that, the big companies are definitely open to that and see that as, a right path for deals in 2022 and 2023. On the back end, what's driving the tech-enabled solutions? I think, large companies have seen this as a successful playbook when done right. And so you're seeing, and it's not with the ASCs, this is with the big hospital systems, coming in and saying we're going to do a big services deal that's going to include equipment, it's going to include service, it's going to include repairs, it's going to keep your IT infrastructure and some of the diagnostics as well. We're going to automate those. We're going to bring that type of capability to really improve workflow. One of the things that I had never heard at this conference is workflow management, and how are we going to enable hospitals to do more with less, realizing that nursing shortages are abundant, they're not going away, they're worse across the globe than they are actually here in the US. And so for a MedTech company to play very strategically at managing that workflow, proving out so that they can more efficiently deliver care is what's really resonating with the
that makes
providers.
a lot of sense. And the large institutions are under fire because you've got workforce pay is jumping dramatically because the nurses now have gone onto contract and getting paid almost 2x from what they were. And CapEx, what's CapEx look like in the hospital setting right now, since a lot of these hospitals are in financial stress?
Yeah, so for the most part, we've seen CapEx stay pretty consistent. You look at capital equipment going into hospital systems. I think there was early on in 2022, we saw a little bit of a decline, but I think as we're getting more into the latter part, we're seeing the volumes actually increase, both for placements and for adoption of new capital equipment. And I think it's really twofold. We heard on our CEO panel yesterday, capital equipment makers are bringing different models to the providers. So, much more operating, much more pay for procedure or pay for performance. So I think we're going to see, that model where the cash outlay up front is not where the discussion is. It's the cash over time. And so, those payment models seem to be resonating. So I think we're going to see more of those, and that then creates a little bit of a capital need for a lot of the OEMs, because they're going to have to fund that, because they're going to have to place it, they're going to have to do fleet management, they're going to have to create a new model,
brand new model.
Business. Yeah. So it'll be interesting.
So what also, we talk about M&A, but also it's the divestiture market is starting to heat up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was announced earlier this week. Medtronic divested themselves on their ortho franchise.
Yep.
It's not a surprise to anybody who's been following that industry. But what are your thoughts on that divestiture market? Where's the opportunities there?
Yeah, I think, if you rewind a few years back, everyone wanted to do big deals. There was this whole move to, scale matters, and we're going to be, one organization to the hospital, and, we're going to sell, that way. And I think, as these organizations have gotten bigger, certain businesses haven't got the capital allocated to them that they really deserve and frankly need to really grow at a rate that is commensurate with the market. And so you reach a conundrum, and we had very well articulated today in our M&A panel of, where are your growth markets, where are you competitive, and where are you profitable? And it's almost that three-dimensional view that they apply to their businesses, and then decide is there a better owner for these assets? And if I do spin it and I increase R&D, I increase my sales and marketing, and maybe I do 3 or 4 deals, will that be more conducive to total shareholder value. And I think, the Healthineers was kind of, I think, one of the first ones of these spins coming out of Siemens. And, they increased the R&D, they went out, they did a bunch of deals. From what I understand, the Varian deal's doing quite well for them. And, and so others have followed. And, Zimmer executed theirs, Becton Dickinson executed theirs. Medtronic announced that they're going to be doing one. GE Healthcare will be coming out. 3M will be bringing out their healthcare business.
That's right.
And frankly, this is going to result in a whole lot of acquirers around these halls, next year and certainly the years thereafter. So it's really exciting from an industry perspective with that kind of activity.
And I tend to agree with you, because when you spin that out to somebody who deserves to own that business, what do?
Yeah.
They infuse more capital.
Yeah.
They have a better distribution channel.
Right.
Right? The Darwinian approach of pairing off what the previous owner was keeping alive and probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I think it ultimately ends up as a better deal for the patient as well.
Yeah, and I think you'll see a lot more overall investment in R&D, because I think the third straight year we saw an increase in percentage of revenue for R&D for MedTechs and a percentage in the increase in dollars. And so what that tells you is that, hey, even during COVID, like, all these companies were plowing all that much more money and investment back into research and development. That's only going to increase as more of these companies are out there really investing in their sole focus and their sole future.
And then final conversation, digital. So digital was on fire.
2021.
2021, right. On fire. Now, I'll say it, you don't have to say it. People who got into digital and healthcare shouldn't have, right? So uneducated money coming in, probably got a little burned. Very frothy of a market. And then finally, who's going to pay for this digital technology? How does revenue ramp in a lot of these models?
So as we heard on one of our panels, digital means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so I do think, with any digital strategy, it has to begin with how are you going to monetize it, and who are your customers really going to be. And even around these halls, we've seen some evolution of that over the last 12, 18 months. Interestingly enough, because we do a lot of work kind of across healthcare, I would say that interestingly enough, the payers have been one of the first movers in bringing kind of digital therapeutics to the market. So looking at how can I bring more efficient, more cost reduction care kind of to the patient. And if you'd asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said no way, they don't care about anything except for enrolling patients, or enrolling members, but they've been the leaders on this. There's now we're starting to see a lot more digital in MedTech, and I think Medtronic with their rollout of digital surgery, they just commented most recently that they're seeing almost one-to-one adoption and deployment of that when they're implementing a robot. J&J and Intuitive have similar AI surgical platforms, and I think we are finally starting to see some of the fruits of that labor. But the bigger question around healthcare IT, I think you're on point. I think they've been hit harder in the public markets than others. They have not seen as big of a rebound from the VC market. So as a lot of the medtechs are thinking about their strategy, I think they're looking at that as one of the areas that might be rather opportunistic for them as they go forward.
Yeah.
So
the big strategics always worry me because they're really not digital natives, and you and I have watched. If you're not a digital native and you're a culture of a pharmaceutical or a medical device, and now you're going to start to think there's a digital culture, that'll be really interesting to see. So I see more partnering and open architecture there.
Yeah, and I think we heard in the CEO panel yesterday that the tech will be part of the conversation, because especially as you look at the front end of kind of mass, call it population health, it's going to be a tech solution. You look on the back end, and it's again population health. It's probably going to be a tech solution. So it's more how do you bring tech into that interventional space and have them be part of the equation on both ends of the continuum.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Anything we didn't cover before we wrap up that we should have that came out of Pulse, or you have a thought on?
I think it was interesting to go into the panel today. I was a little glass half empty, and actually my panelists said no, the glass is actually half full, and so I thought that was refreshing and encouraging as we kind of go into 2023. So looking forward to it.
Same here. Always appreciate the time.
All right.
Thanks, John.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of AvaMed 2022. Be well.